What's up, everybody? Welcome to the View from Jamestown podcast edition. This is episode 14, and it is also part 3 of our tariff update. Sitting down again with Matt Francoeur, TCC's regulatory and sales specialist. Matty, thank you for sitting down this morning. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, I think this is number 4, right?
I think that number 3, tariff update number 3.
Okay, yeah.
I know we did one with market scale in between. That's also posted. That's kind of a good overview, kind of a summary of all 3 of them. But this is the TCC specific part 3 and kind of the seemingly never-ending saga of following along with these tariff updates.
Hopefully it does end.
Hopefully, or at least we have some direction and some final updates on where things are going. But
Yeah.
appreciate you sitting down this morning. I know we've had some positive feedback on these tariff updates, and hopefully this will be one of the most interesting, I think, for most of the audience, kind of with list 3 and things that are most relevant to the chemical industry and chemicals specifically. So maybe jump right into it. What's the update? What's come out and what's new since the last one we did a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, sure thing. So as of September, 17th or 18th, depending on how you cut it, list 3 was finalized, and that originally included 6,031 items, and now it's 5,745 full or partial lines. I'm not sure what exactly they mean by partial lines. None of our products are partial lines, so that is up for a little bit of interpretation, I guess. But it's actually interesting, this one, because the last 2 were just 25% across the board effective date. This one, the effective date is actually very, very soon. It's September 24th, so next Monday at this point, as of the recording of this podcast. And that's for 10%. And so from September 24th, 2018 to December 31, 2018, it's 10%. And then once the year rolls around, January 1st, it bumps up to 25% indefinitely.
So list 1 and 2 were 25% off the bat, but a little bit further out for the effective date, I guess you would say.
Yep.
So this one's a little bit different, where it comes into effect very soon at 10%, and then we'll jump up to 25% after in 2019.
Exactly. So I think, this kind of goes along with what President Trump's been doing, where he's putting the ball in China's court. He wants talks. He wants them to concede some, of their, I guess, the grievances we have against them.
Sure.
So intellectual property and, some unfair trade practices, which no one sane can argue against. I mean, they definitely do have unfair trade practices.
And so obviously this list, I'm seeing a 4.7% reduction. How does that compare to the other 2 lists with things that were taken off or removed afterwards once the public comment period ended?
So it's a little bit skewed, because list 1 originally was the entire, as you remember, $50 billion in tariffs, and it actually just got cut to, I think it was 34 billion, and then list 2 became 16 billion, so they split it in half. So list 1 looks like it was almost a 40% reduction, while in reality it really wasn't a reduction at all. They just moved those tariffs on. List 2 had a 1.7% reduction from 284 lines to 279, so it's only 5 items. So list 1 and 2 were very, very small line-wise, and a pretty substantial size when you look at the entire amount of trade affected. And really, I think it comes down to how many comments were made during that public comment period. So I think list 1 had over 3,000 comments, and so they cut it down to 2 lists. And list 2 had somewhere just under 1,000, I think 750. And list 3, which affected just a ton of products, 6,000 lines almost, they had over 6,000 public comments, which is, it's pretty wild when you look at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you can peruse through and see some pretty big companies on there.
Sure. And so obviously there's still 5,745 products, which is no number to shy away from, obviously.
It's pretty substantial, yeah.
I guess just to keep it specific to TCC for a minute, for any business partners and customers listening, what are the products that we manage that are either were listed or are no longer listed?
So we had 23, I think, products total, and 2 of them were cut as a result of these public comments and review by the U.S. Trade Representative. The first one is PCBTF, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the full name for you. And the other is dimethylmalonate.
Got it. And then, so there are some obviously still pretty big ones that are still included on the list that we either actively manage or have managed. Dicyandiamide obviously being the big one.
Yeah, and then adipic as well, because supply is still rather tight over here.
Sure.
and we're kind of relying on that China supply to, alleviate some of that. So it'll be interesting to see where we try to take that from.
Yeah, and I think the dicyandiamide is the most interesting. I know we've had AJ Pacharka talk about it a bit, and I'm sure we'll have him on the October view in a couple weeks and have him give his 2 cents on it. But I think a lot of people expected that might have been one that could possibly get removed since there is no domestic production.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it kind of brings an interesting point because for list 1 and 2 now, there have been a product exclusion request process published by the U.S. Trade Representative. List 1 was published back in July, and List 2 was published just a couple days ago on 18 September. And those have 90 days. Companies have 90 days to submit a product exclusion request, and it relies on you substantiating information like, is this only produced in China? Are there any third-party countries that produce this item? What the imposition of the additional duties will do to American business interests, and whether or not it's strategically important to the China made in 2025. So you look at something like dicyandiamide, and yes, it has a massive impact on U.S. business interests. Is it only produced in China? But I think you can say absolutely. I mean, I think from what AJ has told me a few times, there are some other smaller, when I say smaller, very small producers in other countries, but nothing to the extent that we would be able to have a full U.S. supply from.
Right.
And whether or not it's strategically important to the Made in China 2025, I think that's something that everyone needs to take a really hard look at and kind of peruse for themselves.
So just to make sure, I guess, I have the process correctly and all the listeners understand what the process is. So, for example, with list 2, so the list of products came out. Okay, we're going to have tariffs on these products. People can submit a public comment with their thoughts on those lists. And then the USTR takes that under consideration and then produces what's technically a final list, quote unquote final list. But even from then, there's this product exclusion requests form or process that people can go through as a second step of either giving their 2 cents or asking for a product to be excluded. That's kind of accurate.
That's it. Yep. And the best place to view that, there's 3 places. You can look at the Federal Register, regulations.gov, which the U.S. Trade Representative site and the Federal Register will forward you to, but the best one is definitely just go straight to the U.S. Trade Representative site, look under the Enforcement tab, and then from there, navigate to Section 301. There's a nice big page with all the product exclusion request details that you need.
And for anybody listening, no matter what platform you're streaming the podcast on, if you scroll down to the show notes, we'll have all that stuff linked up for you. So nice and easy to get to.
Even better, yeah. And I think, so the final list published date for list 1 was the 20th of June, and the product exclusion request came 22 days later on July 11th. List 2 was published or finalized August 23rd. And the product exclusion request was published the 18th of September, so that's 27 days away. So looking at the publishing date of list 3, which was 17 September, we can really anticipate that product exclusion request to come somewhere kind of around or in the week of the 8th of October to the 12th of October. So around that time, you're really going to want to look out for that because that's going to be your lifeline to saving yourself 10 to 25% on these tariffs.
But obviously, and this is different because in the past, the product exclusion requests came out, but the tariffs weren't in effect yet. Now we're going to have the tariffs in effect. Assuming it takes the same 25 days to come out, the tariffs will already be fully in effect by the time this comes out, more than likely, unless it comes out today.
Yeah, just about. So, that number might change. We'll see. We'll see what they actually decide to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I guess just so everyone's clear on the actual tariff. So now we have the list of what's going to be affected. It's obviously a very soon deadline. So how does that work? What does that mean? When are products affected? Is it when they ship from China? Is it when they land in the U.S.? Is it when it gets to the customer? How does that whole process work? Obviously, there'll be a little bit of confusion the 24 or 36 hours around the actual deadline to figure out.
Yeah.
If you have something coming in on the 24th, obviously it might get a little confusing. But for anyone, say, bringing stuff in October, what does that mean now for products on this list?
If you're bringing it at any time after midnight on December 24th, then you are subject to these tariffs. So if you're bringing something in October, expect to pay an additional 10% duty on it. So if you already have a 5.5% duty, it's going to be 15.5% as of September 24th.
Yeah, I guess that's an important thing we haven't really talked about too much. There's obviously already a duty on certain things. Dicey was one of the ones that was 0, correct? And now obviously there's tariffs, so that's obviously a big deal.
Yep.
Other stuff there already was a duty on. Now we're just tacking on another 10 to 25%. So it's the same process of calculating your duty, just you got to add another number to it.
That's it. Yep. And we were expecting the Miscellaneous Tariff Bill Act to kind of alleviate some of that stress. But actually, I took a little bit of a further look into it after some guidance from the Customs and Border Protection. They published a small document. But in Chapter 99 of the U.S. Tariff Code, in sections for List 1 and 2, it states that products in China that are eligible for temporary duty exemptions or reductions under Subchapter 2 to Chapter 99 shall still be subject to the additional duty. And what that means is that the Miscellaneous Tariff Bill Act, which is codified in Subchapter 2 of Chapter 99, will not, alleviate any of the tariffs on List 3 or List 2 or List 1, unfortunately.
Got it.
Yep.
And obviously, you've been taking a close look at things that impact TCC's business specifically, while obviously trying to keep a good overall view of what's happening. But now that we have this kind of final list, quote unquote final, obviously things could change if product exclusions go through. But I guess it's probably safe to say that just plan on nothing being alleviated and go from there. And if things do, then obviously great. But if people have questions on products that are coming in from China that we obviously don't manage, what's the best resource for them to see where the final duty lies and where things have kind of shaken out?
So I've mentioned a few times the NACD public facing tariff website. That's a great resource. There's also one through the U.S. Trade Representative, which also links directly to the Federal Register notices. And what you can do is just press Control F. If you know your tariff code, you can find it. If not, you got to do a little bit of searching. But I mean, that's just about the best you can do. There's no, one-stop resource where you can plug in your tariff code and it'll tell you everything that is affecting it right now.
And is it safe to say that if anybody has specific questions and doesn't know where to start, if they send a note through the website, you'd be happy to try to point them in the right direction?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had a few of our salesmen actually connect me with their customers or long-term friends and been able to help out a little bit. So that's been good. Yeah,
I think that's been a big part of kind of our marketing strategy and doing these podcasts and things like that. We're here to help in whatever fashion we can. And obviously you've been pretty invested and spent a lot of time following what's going on. So I'm sure you're happy to give whatever direction you can.
Exactly. It doesn't take more than a few minutes to kind of search, if you have a product you're interested in, I can pretty much find it out for you.
So this was kind of the big milestone, I think, List 3, to figure out what was going to happen, I guess, specifically with the chemical industry. I know if you're in machinery or different product lines, List 1 or 2 might have been more important. Are there any other upcoming deadlines or things that people should be keeping an eye on, or is it pretty much just that January 1, things are going to jump to 25%? So another kind of accounting function where you got to make sure you're calculating your duties correctly.
Yeah. So for coming up, we're really going to want to keep an eye on. I mean, President Trump has mentioned a few times another tariff package. So List 4 of $267 billion in product affected. And he has mentioned that chemicals are in that list. So
that's quote unquote ready to go, I think, as he put it.
Yeah, pretty much it's in the barrel.
Yeah.
So it, like so many things, it's depending on actions from China and what we see there. But there's been, World Trade Organization disputes initiated by China against our tariffs, Section 301 tariffs. So it seems like they're not really willing to play ball just yet. So we're likely going to see something. And then there's also the retaliatory tariffs from China, which we haven't covered in these podcasts really in any capacity. But if you do export to China, you're really going to want to take a look at that. Yeah.
So that's just if you're bringing stuff straight from the U.S. to China, you're going to be affected in that kind of reverse tariff way. Got it.
And those are, I don't think there's too many chemicals affected until this newest list, which they published in response to our List 3, which covers $60 billion in products and does include chemicals. The other ones, I mean, you saw the list from not just China, but other countries in response to the steel and aluminum tariffs, where they're looking at things like pork, soybeans, really motorcycles, just products that would significantly affect President Trump and the Republican Party's voting base.
Right.
Yeah, which is obviously extremely pointed.
Got it. Yeah. Anything else to add or anything else that's changed that you think is important to get out there?
No, I would say just keep looking at the news and see what President Trump and the USTR has to say.
Yeah. It's been one of the most, I think, surprising things to me. Obviously, being younger, I haven't been around the political atmosphere and how politics affect business all that long, obviously. But it's definitely seemed interesting and different with how quickly things can change. And Trump mentions one comment and, the the domino effect of that's been pretty amazing to watch and see and try to figure out, obviously.
Exactly. And you'll see, like, I mean, as soon as, words come out of that guy's mouth, you'll see our stock market respond and the stock market in China.
Sure.
Yeah. It's kind of pretty interesting how a tweet can affect everything.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely the state of the world we're living in. It's been interesting.
Yeah, that's it.
So I guess we'll follow up with another tariff episode if anything drastically changes. We'll continue to kind of monitor it and publish updates via email on the View from Jamestown and different email newsletters we're putting out. We'll record the October View from Jamestown podcast in probably 2 weeks or so. So maybe do a quick overview there of all the stuff we've been talking about, as well as if anything's changed. Definitely keep an eye out for that, and we'll have a little tariff feature in there.
That's it.
It's been amazing. We've done these podcast tariff updates and stuff's changed, but since the last we did the September View recording, I guess 3 weeks ago now, just the amount that's probably changed since that recording. It'd be interesting to go back and listen and be like, oh nope, all this stuff's different now. It's
Exactly.
It's crazy how quickly stuff has changed.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, so we'll definitely have all the links Matt mentioned in the show notes, no matter where you're listening to this. We also have our tariff tracking blog post, I guess you could call it, kind of an ever updated document as things change. That'll have lists of products that are affected and links and updates and things like that we're seeing on our end. Like Matt said, feel free to contact us via the website, www.thechemco.com. There's a couple of contact forms in there. Any of them will work. And, Matt's happy to have a conversation or figure out the best he can what he's seeing, on things that maybe we haven't mentioned or don't directly affect TCC and everyday business. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them over. We're always happy to help the best we can. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.